Okay, so second attempt at this because actually setting the headphones up so that they can be heard is an important part of actually streaming your audio when you want to do an audio test. Can we check the sound? Yes, we can now. Okay, so we had a few issues with early stages of development here, but what I've done is put together the 4 fields I'll need for character names and the 3 main action fields. I'll go back over those in a moment. We've got 3 panes here. The first one is the preview pane, which is running Roll20. The second one here is my coding pane, and that's where I'm actually going to be putting the HTML and CSS that I need. The third one is the basically my planning. So these are the list of the fields that I actually need to insert, and we've got through those ones so far. I've managed to put in input fields for the name, security clearance, home sector, and clone, and that's these 4 that you see here. And I've got a section which is the main attributes, and the Cortex system that we're using uses dice for attributes. We'll come to that again later. And normally would have something like attributes, actions, maybe values, roles as different sets of traits. I'm maintaining an in-joke that's been used in earlier versions of Paranoia, that you are likely to be performing acts of treason against the computer, good friend computer, and the in-joke that you'll find on some of the older termination forms that you can get is that you have to list what kind of treason the traitor has performed. If you want to report somebody for treason, you can list numerous specific reasons that they are a traitor, but taking the 3 in-jokes that I liked most from those old forms, you could be accused of treason by thought, treason by word, or treason by deed. And these nicely match the Cortex Prime set of mental, social, and physical actions. So I've taken thought, word, and deed as mental, social, and physical. You'll see in the character sheet here on the left that I've assigned each of those a value. So the value that will be applied to these is going to be 6, 8, and 10. And whilst this character sheet's not much to look at in a minute, what I'm showing first is that I create fields using this code and then import it into Roll20's sandbox to show you that the fields actually tally up. In the first video, which I've now deleted because there was no audio and I was talking to myself because it wasn't recording, I had some problems where Roll20 wasn't accepting the attributes that I was creating, but it was saving the values. Confused me a lot. That seems to have solved itself in the background. So what I'd like to do is I'm going to just go through these one more time. Anything with a sheet dash prefix is one of the styles that I'll be applying, and I'm using this sheet to get around any issues with the legacy or otherwise validation inside Roll20. So ignore sheet dash, but wrapper, that's the thing that wraps around the entire character sheet, and that's the style I will be using to put any background images or overall styles for all elements. Anything where I've got traits 1, traits 2, and eventually I'll be using, in fact, traits 3, is a style that I'll use to break sections up into columns. So I'm going to start with a single column, inside of which I will have 2 columns. The first column currently holds my info block, and that will be the tutorial 1, which is the name of the character that we're creating on the left. Column 2 will be the attributes block, which is labeled treasons. And then each of the attributes has its own block, thought, word, and deed. And they're all held inside a block with traits 3. So when I start adding the styles later, that will put each of the attributes thought, word, and deed in its own column, within treasons as a block, treasons as a block will be inside a column that is again inside the wrapper, etc. We'll see that. So what I'm thinking is I may actually start coding that shortly, but I was going to skip and not do the specialties as that's a long list, and it would be something that you would have to sit down and watch me do. So I thought maybe instead I'll do the stress block. So I'll just do stress now. And so I'm going to use, let's see, sheet dash stress, and that's going to produce that block. And I've got 6 in total. So I'm going to do 2 rows of 3. So I'm going to put next thing is of course to get the title, and that's stress. And then I'm going to create my 3 columns. So that's sheet dash traits 3, and that's going to create 3 columns into which I will then I'm going to be using grid layouts. So I can just create as many blocks as I want inside that traits 3, and then my styling will just slot them all into place afterwards. So at this point, I want individual attributes. So still don't like the name attributes, but I'll do a searcher in place later because I want there to be less ambiguity. I've got attributes as a block, and I've got attribute as an individual trait, and I'm using traits for that. I think I may end up renaming traits as columns. I may end up renaming, yeah, we'll do a lot of renaming at a later stage. But what I can do is I will just steal this code from here and slot that into here. So this is going to be another attribute. It's at H2 rather than H1 level. I'm just using that to control how these come through. And I'm going to bring in the 6 stress that I've got. I'll do the same again. Oh, of course. So that's 3 there. Those. So yes, I've got multiple hygienes. Freedom, friendship, and real security stress. How do you feel with each of these? So let's properly label them. Freedom, security. So every time I save, which I've just done, the display in the left-hand panel will refresh. At first that bothered me, but it's starting to get to the point where that helps me to know I am saving my file and it's ready to upload. So I'm going to use the sandbox tools here to upload the HTML file in, and that should update the character sheet, which closed when it refreshed, so I've got to reopen that. Here's our good friend tutorial. There we are. The profile picture will load. So as you can see on screen, I've prepped a load of the icons in advance, and this is one of the character profile pictures that I produced using HeroForge. And here we are. So the code that I put in on the middle pane has come across. So have the notes that I left myself in the previous video, deleted video. So I've got notes that I want to go through and style. 1, 2, and 3 column layouts. I want to mush up the character name and box the treasons. So I'm also now going to want to box up the stress. And that's basically where I will have each of those lay out as, because I'm going to set up the columns, they'll lay out in blocks that I want 3 by 3 by 3 columns across, and then in the case of stress, 3 by 2 because it will be 6 stresses in that block. And stress values could be anything from 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, or the value I use to track whether or not you've topped out past a D12, and that's a 14. Those that don't know the Cortex system, we're going to get to that. We're going to get into that, but right now I'm just trying to show that as I'm coding these elements, they're showing up in the character sheet. And yes, void of all forms of prettiness and styling, but they're showing up. And that's slightly better than it was the first time I got sat down on this, because they were not doing that. Yeah. I'm going to look at whether or not I can actually do something here. I need to come back and look at that. Okay. Right, I'm going to probably call that video. So I'm going to, yeah, I'm going to check how my sound levels worked out on this. See whether or not the quality of the sound is better on this than my original sound check. Clearly, my previous sound check, there was no sound, hence I deleted it. So thank you very much. I will bid you farewell, and might pop back in for a little bit more tonight, depending on how this sound check went. Otherwise, tomorrow, coming in and doing some styling and some other tweaks.